What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me today. If you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you'll know that I love animation. And not only do I love animation, but I think it's something that everyone should enjoy. So in this video, I want to guide you through what I love about animation and show how the medium itself is something for everyone to enjoy and not just for children. So we're going to talk about Western animation and then anime, which is animation out of Japan and Korea and China and most Eastern countries. Now, a lot of people will try to classify anime as its own sort of medium, but it's all the same thing. It's just a difference in perspective and storytelling and style, but the medium is the same. It's all blanket animation, right? The reason they're able to get away with that, we'll get into that later in the video, is because there's not a stigma around, animation is only for a certain group, right? But let's just get into it and let's talk about the things that I love, the things that you love, and let's have this conversation because I think it's going to be a blast. Now, I grew up for as long as I can remember watching animation and enjoying cartoons. And I knew from like the time I was 5 that I wanted to draw and do animation in some way. As I got older, for the longest time, I worried about being able to make animation a job. And I assumed it was just going to be a hobby that I did it and drawing and making comic books and all that stuff. Because they're all very tangentially related. It's all sequential storytelling, right? But eventually I sucked it up and said, I'm just going to make a go of it and whatever happens, happens. And I'm just going to follow my passion. I understand that I'm incredibly privileged to have been able to make that choice and not just had to do something to survive, right? But I'm very thankful I was able to. And it's a gambit that paid off for me because since 2009, when I graduated from SCAD, I've been steadily employed doing animation in some way. Over the years, that animation background has also expanded into live video and photography. And that just happened naturally when I realized that the principles and concepts of my animation education translated really well into other mediums. And it does that because all these other mediums that I've gotten into have the same basic principles, but the tools are different. But things like lighting, lens choice, color, composition, story structure, those all have roots in the same sort of principles I learned in the animated worlds that inspired me as a child and that I learned about as a college student going on into adulthood. And the fact that these things are so closely related should give you a hint as to where I'm going with this video and why everything is more related as a viewing experience for you as the audience, right? Now, like I said, I was, like most people, interested in animation at a very early age. But as I thought about it more and then started trying to make my own flip books and cartoons and design characters and all that kind of stuff, I realized that, even little, I realized that what drew me to animation wasn't like bright colors and loud noises, which a shocking number of adults think that's the draw of animation, and that is just mind-blowing to me because it really tells me that you've never even tried to pay attention to it. But the real draw, the thing that really inspired me, is the way it brings worlds and characters and anything that you can imagine to life. It's just like what you were doing imaginally when you read a book or you look at comics. Like, if you're into those things, even from a young age, you'll start picturing them living, breathing, moving in your head as you're reading these books. The fact that animation could make these worlds and characters talk and live and move and breathe and just exist is so cool. And once you realize that that's what the medium does, then you can start to see how you can kind of do anything with it. And it doesn't have to be a story for one specific group or even a story told by a specific group. It can be a medium for anyone and everyone. But that's the coolest thing to me, how you bring whole universes or several to life and you tell stories about those worlds and the characters and you make them live and breathe and you become a part of that world as a viewer. If you're listening to this and you're starting to hear similarities in between live action films, television, novels, comics, good. That's awesome. And that's kind of my whole point. Animation itself is a medium for storytelling. And that storytelling can be impactful, entertaining, moving, gut-wrenching. It can do everything that any other type of medium could do, and in some cases better because of budgets, time constraints, or the fact that you just can't make this in the real world, right? Since you can kind of do anything with the medium, the stories can be for anyone. Fiction itself can be a beautiful tool to strengthen and grow the creative side of our minds. Which is why it's really a shame when I see adults just ignoring fiction altogether because they think it's a waste of their time. It's not. Let me explain. As we get older, the creative and imaginal side of our brain gets a little stiffer, and coming up with creative solutions or creative ideas can be difficult. So you really want to strengthen and work out that part of your brain constantly to just keep it healthy like everything else. Well, I'm not a kid. What does it matter if I imagine or I'm creative? And that's why I don't bother with fiction. You're missing the big picture. Creativity can be used for all kinds of things, and keeping that creative side of your brain healthy and strong can help you come up with out-of-the-box business solutions. It can help you quickly pivot and come up with new ideas to solve issues that may occur in your day-to-day life. So while at first glance it may not seem important, it can be even in the business world. And that's just a small bit of advice on this little tangent here. Now let's get back to animation. And you may be thinking now at this point, well then what's the point in animation if it's just equal to fiction in other mediums? That's a great question. And originally it was designed to have the impossible happen, to do stuff that you could never experience. Like there's an old vaudeville show called Gertie the Dinosaur where they had an animated dinosaur talk and interact with the vaudeville person on stage. And like, you can't do that in the real world at the time. You couldn't make an animatronic. You couldn't have a cool 3D thing. So they animated it. And then there's also a whole story about two guys in a bet trying to figure out if a horse's legs all left the ground at once when it ran, or if there was always a leg touching the ground. But that's its own tale. Now, as technology is advanced, obviously you can do anything and make it look realistic. But the budget is going to be enormous. I mean, just look at the budget for Avatar: The Way of the Water. But when you make things realistic, you lose out a ton on the expressiveness and the exaggeration that can happen in animation that makes it really cool to look at and very pleasing. And that exaggeration and expressiveness is what makes animation itself so appealing. Beyond that, there's just some beauty in the medium itself. An animator takes pen to paper, stylus to Cintiq, hand to clay, or mouse cursor to 3D control rig. And then they breathe life into something that was static and lifeless. You can change the way something is drawn or rendered to enhance the emotion of a scene. You can squash and stretch characters or the whole world if necessary to put weight and emphasis on actions and emotions. These manipulations of characters and the world around them are just a visual treat for your eyes. And they're what make the medium of animation really stand out from other mediums. And we're not even getting into the principle of appeal, which is how you can manipulate the world or the characters as much as you want to emphasize the appeal to the audience or their sense of uneasiness or fear. Those things are what make animation really stand out to me. Beyond that is the high level of storytelling that can happen. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of adults drop off. They don't think that that level of storytelling can exist in the animated medium, especially here in the US. They're more forgiving of it in other places. In the countries where there's less of a hang-up with animation or comic books or manga, in countries where there's less of a hang-up on just the animated is for kids sort of thing, they understand that there's a wide variety of stories to be immersed in, and they can be for anyone and everyone, kids or adults. Now here's where most people would say, go watch anime and be done with it. And it's great. They do have a wide variety of stories for everyone. But I do want to start with some Western animations and giving my thoughts and recommendations about those, because they are there. They're good Western animations for the whole family, for kids, for adults. We have that variety, just nowhere close to as extensive as exists in anime, and that's simply because of that hang-up that I mentioned earlier. Sort of separately, but there's also this weird trend that seemed to happen sometime after Archer was released on US television, that adult-focused animation had to have this sort of unappealing character design. I mean, just look at any of the adult-focused animations on Netflix and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, unless it becomes the only thing that gets greenlit. And then that's how you have to design things or structure things to tell an adult story. And that's where I take some issue with it. Like, let people change up, let people have variety, and let them experience stuff with a whole range of looks and feels. And so that's what I'm going to try to do with my recommendations, is give you a range of things that are suitable for adults that you can hop into, and I think you'll enjoy. I hope this little overview lesson so far in the video has kind of sparked your interest in the subject for you all. So now that we've done all that, I wanted to give you some of my favorites and talk about why I like them, so that you have some place to start with letting go of those preconceived notions that you may have about animation or anime, and enjoy the stories and art that the medium has to offer. Now, first up on my list is a personal favorite of mine and Heather's. It's Bob's Burgers. This animation's great because as you watch more and more of the show, you get to see this amazing character development that's really just sort of exaggerated realism. And you see these stories that are presented in a humorous manner, but are about trying to get by in life when you are overall very average. It's funny, it's heartwarming, it's episodic, so you don't have to start at the beginning if you don't want to. You can just kind of jump in and see if it's something that interests you. You will get like deeper character development, see how they change and grow through the series if you watch everything, but you can just hop in whenever and enjoy an episode. But it's a fun slice of life about just trying to survive being a lower middle class business owner and family. Next up on my list has to be Gravity Falls. At first glance, this seems like a show for younger viewers. As the episodes go on and more of this overarching sci-fi mystery is unraveled, you realize that there's a lot more to this show than it initially seemed, and it's a lot deeper than you thought. I don't give too much away on it, but it's a really good show, and it definitely has interests in there for all ages. Then I wanted to give a quick mention to Star Trek: The Lower Decks. You don't need any prior Star Trek knowledge of the universe or the characters or all that to enjoy the show. But it's this very funny comedy about the people who aren't the stars of the Star Trek universe. They're all the people that are on the lower decks of these ships that you never see, and them just trying to get by. Great sci-fi comedy, and you should check it out if that's something that you think you would be into. Now I'm just going to try to rapid fire some shows that just have to be mentioned, and there's a wide variety here, so I'm sure you can find something. First up, the 1992 Batman animated series. That is just an expertly handled show. It has these amazing dramatic storylines, like just excellent storytelling with this dark, moody tone that really suits the world and the characters. Just an absolute masterclass in storytelling for animation, especially at the time that it came out. Then there's Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is a fantasy epic that has some of the finest world building of any show on modern television. Then we have any of the shows that came out during Cartoon Network's cartoon era. That's shows like Dexter's Lab, Johnny Bravo, Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, which wasn't a cartoon. Technically, they didn't market it as that, but it aired during the cartoon segment, so fantastic cartoon. And then there's like Ed, Edd n Eddy, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and just the rest. Like, they are incredible as works of art because Cartoon Network allowed creators to do something really different with cartoon. And the reason they were able to get away with it is because they did shorts and then you voted on your favorite and then they would produce a cartoon from it. So a lot more experimentation, like artistically, and you came out with some really great stuff that's definitely worth your time viewing as art pieces and as fun stories. And personally, I wouldn't sleep on A Ghost in Molly McGee. It's a Disney cartoon that's more modern, and it is the odd couple trope at its finest. Okay, I think that's covered it for Western animation. Obviously, this isn't a comprehensive list, but it's something that's just broad enough that I think you can find something to enjoy. What are some of y'all's favorite animations? Like, leave that in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Now, we're not done, because obviously you cannot have a discussion about animation being for everyone, young, old, and then all the ages in between, without mentioning anime. Now, when I was in high school, there was a huge stigma with enjoying anime, even more so than regular cartoons. But I'm glad to see for a huge part that that's gone away and people are just able to enjoy what they want to enjoy, which on another tangent is something that I firmly believe in the older I get is, you know, life is for the most part pretty hard. None of us asked to be here. So don't make anyone feel bad about the harmless things that they enjoy that might bring some small sliver of joy into their hard lives. Like, just let people enjoy harmless things. But when it comes to anime, there is almost an infinite list of things with stories for just about everyone. So I'm just going to talk about a few of the classics and modern animations so that you can be pointed in a direction and get started on your journey. Because honestly, with stuff like this, discovery is a huge part of the fun. Now, if you're someone that's into dramas, historical fictions, war movies, we're gonna start off the recommendation with Grave of the Fireflies. It's about a brother and sister in Japan who are called in the World War II fire bombings, and everything that they go through trying to survive the horrors of war. Now, I don't want to say too much more about the plot because going in cold is definitely the way to do this to maximize the impact of the storytelling that exists in this film. But if the subject and genre interest you, I promise you, you are in for a true cinematic experience, up there with some of the greatest war films ever made. Speaking of cinematic masterpieces or just true cinematic experiences, honestly, you can't go wrong with anything from Studio Ghibli. Howl's Moving Castle, Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, Princess Mononoke, any of the rest. These movies are films that can be enjoyed by children. I mean, I enjoyed them growing up. But when you watch them as an adult, you realize the complexity and layers that actually exist in these stories. They deal with loss, loneliness, love, the horrors of war, aging, burnout, environmental protection, compassion, and so much more. I mean, these films are layer upon layer of unique messages that purposely speak to the viewer in different ways at different times in their lives. Absolute works of art. Now, the next recommendation is specifically if you love music and old samurai films, Kurosawa films. I would highly suggest jumping into anime with Samurai Champloo by Shinichiro Watanabe. Its overarching story is about this girl named Fu enlisting the help from Mugen and this character named Jin to find a samurai that smells like sunflowers. It's set up like a road movie, like Lone Wolf and Cub, or just any film where their characters are traveling on a journey. That's what a road movie is. But it uses that vehicle to showcase themes of tolerance, acceptance of others, and a big one is the acceptance of death and just its role in our lives. But my absolute favorite part is the way music is worked into the stories and the themes of the show. Watanabe uses hip-hop to reinforce the series' focus on the countercultural and minority characters and themes. Its unique blend of like super slick animation that's just fun to watch, and the incredible music choices make it like a must watch for lovers of any of the aspects that I've talked about. If you end up liking Samurai Champloo, definitely check out Cowboy Bebop. It's created by the same person, and it does a lot of similar things, albeit with jazz and this sort of shroud of science fiction heist movie. Now, if you're an adult that likes giant robots and themes of war and maybe a little bit about how that affects people, then there's definitely a Gundam series for you. I like Gundam Wing and 8th MS Team, but you may want to choose a more modern story. Luckily, the different versions of Gundam are as plentiful as stars in the sky, so you can definitely look through that and find something that you might be interested in if that first little bit tickles your fancy. Now I want to talk about some modern anime. The first little grouping I'm going to talk about is the I came for gorgeous animation and stayed for the compelling stories section. Now, my first two recommendations in this section are Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer. Now, some of the shows that I've talked about on here are kind of for everyone. These are not that. These are very much for adults because they are quite violent, but the animation is absolutely mesmerizing. It's stunning stuff. And then when you get past that super cool animation, the stories are very compelling in their own right. I don't want to go too much into the plots on either of those because I think you're better just going in cold. But if you look at the titles, you'll kind of get what they're about. And like I said, some of the most gorgeous animation that I've seen in modern animations. Then in this category, there's Chainsaw Man. Its animations are rougher, but not in a bad way. It's in the sense that it feels like the lines in the fight scenes were made with chainsaws. It kind of gives you that feeling. It's that enhancement of feelings that I was talking about earlier. It seems like a simple story at first, but as more is revealed, kind of the less you know and the more you want to find out. So all these are super cool, energetic stories with absolutely gorgeous animations that you should check out. Next up is a breakout hit that is kind of super beloved already, even though it's just one season in, and that's Spy X Family. I'm pretty sure you're supposed to say Spy and Family when you have an X, but most people just seem to say the X, so there you go. Anyway, if it weren't for the occasional violence and language, this would absolutely have something for everyone, and I really wish that they would go back and do like a family-friendly version of this, because I know my nieces, who are like 6 and 3, they would absolutely adore the story, especially the scenes with Anya and Bond and like all the other kids, if that stuff weren't around that would make it, less okay for them to watch. But the story here is about like a spy named Lloyd who needs to get closer to a rival country's higher-ups. So he enlists the help of an orphan named Anya and a lady named Yor from City Hall to pose as a family so they can get Anya into a very prestigious private school where all the higher-ups' children go, and that way Lloyd can get close to those higher-ups that he's supposed to spy on. But all isn't as it seems, because Lloyd doesn't know that Yor is actually an assassin. She doesn't just work at City Hall.
Down, Yor. Don't even think about it. That's exactly the sort of thing that would expose me as an assassin. Don't be weird.
Nor does he know that Anya can read minds, and she knows the truth about both of them.
What? An assassin? A spy? An assassin? This is so cool!
The subject matter is handled so well here, and the character of Anya is this absolutely adorable glue that holds the whole animation together, because it's a very good balance in between lighthearted family moments and a spy thriller.
Mama! I'm so scared!
It's okay. You're all right now.
That's the kid's mom? We'll have to grease both of them.
Part slice of life story, part spy thriller. This is a truly great story, and if you give it a chance, I can almost guarantee that you'll like it. So my next category has become one of my favorites, and I'll call this category Buck Wild Concepts, but handled extremely well to compelling and humorous results. Now, these are essentially non sequitur humor in story form, and I absolutely love it. These are silly concepts, but they're handled with a level of care that makes them an enjoyable watch even for adults. Now, the shows that I have in this category are Reborn as a Vending Machine, Now I Wonder a Dungeon, and Mashal, Magic and Muscles. Reborn as a Vending Machine is exactly what it sounds like. The main character dies and is reborn as an actual vending machine. And the concept is buck wild, to say the least. But they've handled this odd concept so well that it's an absolute joy to watch as a fun fantasy comedy. In comparison to a lot of the big sads on this list, it's a nice lighthearted refresher. Then we have Mashal, Magic and Muscles. It's about a Harry Potter-esque world where everyone is born with magic. And if you're unlucky enough to not be born with magic, you're either executed or abandoned, since you really have no place in the world. Enter the main character Mashal. He doesn't have any magic, but he makes up for it with extreme workouts. And when I say extreme, I mean ridiculous workouts, to the point where he's fooling the world into thinking he has magic with just his muscles. And he hilariously calls it muscle magic. Then through a series of misfortunes, Mashal has to enroll in a magic school, very much like Hogwarts. But can he survive magic school without having any magic? This is the story of Mashal, Magic and Muscles. Like I said, super cool story. It's really funny. It's a buck wild concept again, just like the last one, but you're gonna need some palate cleansers versus some of the other things on this list. Definitely gonna need something after Grave of the Fireflies. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat that for you guys. It is gut-wrenching. That's everything that I have for Western animation, anime. I mean, what are your favorite anime, TV shows, movies? What are your favorite mangas? What are your favorite Western animations? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear all about it because I love talking animation. If you guys enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and leave a comment below telling me about it. I hope this spurs interest in animation for people who have never experienced it before, because I really do believe that animation is for everyone. There's not an age limit. It's for everybody, truly everybody, because anybody can take and create an animated story and make it something for anyone. And that's what's so cool about it. And I hope if you've never given animation a shot before, this will convince you to. And if you do like animation, maybe there's something on here that you haven't seen, though I highly doubt it because these are all pretty mainstream recommendations, mostly just because, again, I'm trying to introduce people into subjects. Let me know your thoughts down below, and as always, I hope to see you out there. Bye.